What does an architect do? In this series, I'm going over what an architect does. So in this video, I'm going to talk about design development. This is the middle stages of design. Design development is all about figuring out the design and what's going on with the project. You make certain decisions, so then you can move on with different systems. So you should have the structural system lightly picked out with schematic design and the construction type of the building. Hello, I'm Caitlin Rossier, a licensed architect and founder of mentorDINO is your go-to resource for professional growth and development. In 2023, I launched this YouTube channel to share experiences, stories, and resources with you. But I need your help to be able to host live panel discussions, interviews, on-site trainings, and mentorship groups. I need to hit 1,000 subscribers to be able to do that on YouTube. So I'd really appreciate your support in hitting the subscribe button below and letting your colleagues know about this resource. Let's build a brighter future together. Welcome to mentorDINO. Now let's dive into the discussion. What does an architect do? In this series, I'm going over what an architect does. If you haven't checked out the previous videos, I highly recommend checking them out, and especially the initial one where I go over the design process, because that's how this series is being distributed. So in this video, I'm going to talk about design development. This is really kind of the middle stages of design. So we talked about schematic design in the last video, and we'll be talking about construction documents in the next video. Design development is all about figuring out the design and what's going on with the project. You make certain decisions, so then you can move on with different systems. So you should have the structural system lightly picked out with schematic design and the construction type of the building. So then you can move into all the other questions you can answer now that those decisions are made. You need to know what the occupancy is of the floor, so then you can figure out egress and flow. You may have done initial test fit outs if you are doing a fit out for a new building. If you're doing core and shell and fit out, you may have started fit outs, but you may be going more into some of them in the DD phase. In the DD phase, you may not have all of the answers figured out, but you're trying to grab the bigger components, because oftentimes if you didn't get pricing done at schematic design, you will likely get pricing done now and in design development. And this is a gut check. So this is to be able to make sure that the design and the direction the design team is going aligns with the owner's budget and the current pricing of products. This did become hard during COVID because the pricing of products were going through the roof in all different sorts of directions that we had to kind of scramble to figure out different alternatives. So you never know what you will need to work on. So design development, you're really going through and adding details. In schematic, you may have located where the toilets are going in the core part of the building. In design development, you're going to finish laying out the toilet rooms. So you would have figured out quantity of water closets and sinks and drinking fountains all in schematic design, and you may be refining it and adding potentially locations of different accessories like paper towels, trash cans, hand wash systems, baby changing tables, all that fun stuff in schematic design to make sure it all flows and works. You'll be going more into materials and working with the interior design team to figure out different materials, how they're using. You'll go through more design iterations and talking with either users or facilities to figure out what options you're going to be proceeding with, and just trying to get up that level of detail and adding more information. If you got schematic design priced, you likely had to write some narratives or more descriptions about what you're doing to be able to express that to a contractor. And that's a little bit quicker than doing all the design documentation for it. So in DDs, you really are trying to make sure the set is fully complete. And this can be finishing filling out a cartoon set that you may have done in schematic design, which is pretty much sketching out what kind of drawings you think you need, depending on detail cuts, what project type you're doing, what your scope is. And so really making sure those sheets are filled out. You wouldn't have likely gotten all those sheets distributed in schematic design. If you're doing a fit out, you may have just sent out plans and reflected ceiling plans for the schematic design phase. And now you need to get sections, interior elevations, and so on in design development. And so what I mean with all of those, so a floor plan is cut generally about 4 feet above floor height and seeing what everything is below. And then an RCP or reflected ceiling plan is cut higher and then looks at everything above. So what type of ceilings, where does mechanical diffusers go, where do lights go, where sprinklers, other speakers, and other little things that are placed in the ceiling. Elevations is if you had to do an elevation of a wall. So physically taking a look straight onto that wall. This is a little bit more furniture related that we wouldn't elevate, but if you can think this piece is built in casework or built in cabinetry, this is where you'd want to locate it on a wall, dimension it, identify height, width, and then any other section details or tagging it to reference it back further in the set where you have details. And then if you're doing a new construction building, you'll have sections through your exterior wall. So that's literally me cutting straight out if you go through that window and seeing how a sill and a head of a window or even jamb is detailed out around windows and doors and what materials go where. So you'll have different section cuts. You'll even have building elevations. So an elevation like that interior one I explained, you'll have a building one as well. So you can show where glass is going, different materials, different heights on where things go, different floor levels, and providing them with the types of glass and materials that go in everywhere. And then you'll start getting into more detailed components. We do tell the contractors different wall types. So if you're doing a wood construction building, they will be a wood stud construction versus metal stud. You have different head and sill details of a wall that you're putting in, jambs and head details of doors, any floor transitions that go through with different types of flooring, plan details, ceiling details on how relationships interact. And that all starts getting put in during the design development phase. So you kind of go from more abstract thinking, getting into a little bit of the weeds, and you're starting to form and put everything together to make sure the set has the information it needs to cover for pricing. And then if there's anything you can't cover or an owner does a last minute change or wanting to add a specialty material or even put in what's called a deduct or add alternate, so that's where they just want this price and they want to see what the added cost is, or adding a deduct cost where if we can't have the nice material, here is a deduct alternate of something that should be cheaper and they can price that out. So you may still have some sort of narrative during the design development phase or a basis of design narrative that's included. And generally at this phase is when you start putting together your specification or project manual. And so that is a thicker book, and you don't usually learn that much about specifications, but in there it goes through each type of material and they have it all cataloged by different areas. You should learn the catalog numbers, at least for the different sections for the AREs. So I know 7 is more thermal because I always do 7 and it looks like flashing to me. And 8 is openings. So again, I look at it as an 8 has holes in it, so openings for doors and windows. 9's finishes, so I just know that off the top of my head. So those are some of the easy ones that you can jump into if you're starting at a firm. I typically recommend starting in the 9 series and seeing what's going on because it breaks it out pretty simply. And then you can work into some other materials when you're starting to learn and understand how to break out a specification and how to read it. So hopefully you like learning a little bit about design development and how we start getting a little bit more into the details and the weeds and understanding materials and what goes into a project, and go from there. And I hope to see you guys in the next video where I talk about construction documents.